The work of archaeologists never stops. There's always something to be found somewhere in the world, and there's always an archaeologist ready and willing to find it. The past few years have been just as productive as all the years that have gone before for archaeologists. And this video contains the best and most interesting of their recent discoveries. The discovery of Viking artifacts in Norway is par for the course for archaeologists, but some discoveries are more special than others. Take this discovery from Hestes, Norway, for example. In mid-2020, archaeologists excavating the grave of a woman in the area found that she was still wearing her original Viking-era clothes. This delicately embroidered woolen fabric is thought to be almost 1,000 years old. Textiles decompose over time, so archaeologists rarely find any surviving material when they open ancient graves. Although Viking-era textiles have been found by other archaeologists in the past, all such discoveries have happened in Denmark. This find is a first for Norwegian experts. The other goods buried with the woman suggested she lived a wealthy, comfortable life. She went to her grave with a turtle-shaped three-lobed brooch and a collection of fine pearls. Fine fabrics were rare in Viking-era Norway, so when someone died, they were usually handed down to the family of the deceased. For this woman to go to her grave fully dressed might suggest that nobody else was thought worthy of wearing her clothes. This might only be a scrap of dull brown fabric to the untrained eye, but to an archaeologist, it's priceless. For quite some time, archaeologists haven't known what to make of the Nosetovaska votiva. It's a unique, anomalous wooden structure that was found on an Italian hillside in 2005. 16 years later, a new study of the structure might have provided a few answers. The oak-built structure, which is about the size of a swimming pool and not totally dissimilar in shape, is around 3,400 years old, dating it to the Middle Bronze Age. It might have been the second object of this type to be built at the site, with the remains of its predecessor crushed beneath it. Dragging the timber uphill to build the structure wouldn't have been easy, so it must have had a specific and important purpose. That purpose probably wasn't to serve as a public swimming bath. The presence of ceramics, figurines, and stone idols placed inside the structure suggests that votive offerings were left here, and might identify the Nosetovaska votiva as the centerpiece of an elaborate supernatural water ritual. Quite what the ritual might have been is something we'll probably never know, but some knowledge is better than none at all. Around 3,200 years ago, a man called Ortinu lived in a house in Ugarit on the Syrian coast. Ortinu was one of the most accomplished traders of his era and worked on behalf of the state. He handled correspondence back and forth between the kings and rulers of Assyria, Beirut, Egypt, and the Hittites. How do we know all of this? Because the correspondence was written on baked clay tablets, and we've found the tablets in the ruins of Ortinu's house. Most of his documents are ledgers and letters detailing copper and wood exports from the Syrian interior, and also the import of goods from Egypt and Cyprus. It seems that Ortinu handled much of the king of Ugarit's personal correspondence too. That correspondence has provided us with new information about famine and drought that struck the area in the year 1185 BCE, with the surrounding regions writing to Ortinu and the king requesting aid. It's not known how many, if any at all, of the requests for assistance were answered. What they prove is that the concept of foreign aid and international cooperation existed even back then. Finding a Stone Age axe is a thrill for an archaeologist, but finding a Stone Age axe with its wooden handle still attached is even better. Such discoveries are rare because wood perishes over time, but they do happen occasionally. Here's one such find from Rodbehaven on the Danish island of Lolland. It's a 5,500-year-old axe, discovered in November 2019 during an archaeological survey of land that's been earmarked for a new train line. This part of the island was once underwater, and the axe was found embedded in what used to be the seabed. There's a lack of oxygen in the clay ground here, and that's ultimately what saved and preserved the wood. Ancient wooden stakes, bows, and paddles have been found in the same area, raising the possibility that they were thrown into the sea deliberately as votive offerings. Axes like this one would primarily have been used for working wood, but would also have come in handy when cutting back forests to make camps, settlements, or farmland. Of course, it would probably have served as a useful weapon, too. Here's an unusual discovery in Poland. In June 2021, modern road workers found a very old road in an area where they were planning to create a new one. They literally stumbled across the handiwork of their 18th century predecessors. The discovery took place in the town of Jarosław and is made all the more unusual by the fact that the old road is made from wood rather than a more durable material. That suggests that the road was considered prestigious. It may once have led to the city gates. It also doesn't appear to have been used very often. With wooden roads, archaeologists usually expect to see signs of carriage grooves or hoof prints from the horse-drawn carriages that traveled along them. There's little sign of either in this instance. Experts think that either the wood was replaced shortly before the road was abandoned, or the road was never finished in the first place. That idea might be supported by the fact that only fragments of it exist. The first 100-foot-long stretch of it was found by the road workers and was joined by shorter stretches found nearby by archaeologists, but there's no sign that the individual segments were ever connected. Looking at the prestigious opera house in Zurich, Switzerland's biggest city, it's hard to imagine that the land it stands upon was once a field, but it was. The proof can be found directly beneath the opera house's underground car park. There, in early 2021, archaeologists discovered what they believe to be the world's oldest examples of deliberate cultivation of opium poppies by humans. In this case, the humans would have been prehistoric farmers tending their land in the Alps. The conclusion of the archaeologists is supported by scientists who've analyzed the seed. Their work has confirmed that the seeds are 7,500 years old, and that more than 87% of them are a type that only exists in domesticated poppies. Does this mean that the ancient residents of Zurich were smoking or otherwise consuming opium? Not necessarily. It's probably more likely that they used the seeds to make porridge, and may not even have been aware of the narcotic properties of the plants. Even if they were, it's more likely that they used the poppies as medicine rather than anything recreational. Most of us can agree that the quality of the feathers in your bedding is important. Some feathers are more comfortable than others and will lead to a better night's sleep. The ancient pre-Viking warriors of Scandinavia shared this concern about beds and feathers, but they weren't worried about sleep. They were concerned about their journey to the afterlife. Archaeologists have recently completed a study of 7th and 8th century graves in the region of Valsgard, Sweden, and noticed that the majority of the beds that warriors were laid to rest on are made from duck down. This isn't a coincidence. According to Nordic beliefs, the right or wrong choice of feathers could speed up or impede your soul's travel to the afterlife. Domestic birds like chickens were bad choices because they'd slow you down, but the feathers of a goose would speed things up. The most desirable feathers of all were those of eagle owls, but they were a little difficult to acquire. For most warriors, geese or ducks would do just fine. This strange belief might sound odd to our modern ears, but it persisted in some parts of rural Sweden until as recently as the 18th century. Humans have loved playing sports for almost as long as they've existed. The type of sports we play have evolved and become more sophisticated as time has passed, but some sports have older origins than you might expect. we can probably trace Polo, a ball game played on horseback, to the China of around 2,900 years ago. In October 2020, researchers from the University of Zurich examined 3 leather balls found buried in graves at the Yanghai Cemetery of Turfan, northwest China. They're the oldest leather balls ever found in Europe or Asia. The occupant of one of the graves was also buried with a composite bow, a curved stick, and a pair of horse riding trousers. Illustrations of ancient Chinese riders playing a ball game with sticks have been found in the country before, but this is the first direct physical evidence of the game actually being played. It's impossible for us to learn the rules of this ancient game, but it's probably fair to assume that it wasn't totally dissimilar to modern polo. Some archaeologists believe that the game was actually developed as a military training exercise rather than a sport, but that hasn't been proven. We generally credit the Romans with making the finest jewelry in ancient Europe, but a discovery from August 2020 suggests that maybe we ought to direct our praise elsewhere. It seems that the jewelry made by the Goths in what's now Poland 2,000 years ago is every bit as good as anything the Romans could produce. In some cases, it was even better. This news comes from Warsaw's Institute of Archaeology and Ethnology, which has recently been examining 1st century graves in a cemetery in the Polish village of Weklica. The silver ornaments found in many of the graves are made of very high-quality metals, much of which exceeds the composition quality of modern silver jewelry. The ornaments are very pure and very valuable. Gold jewelry was less common, but what has been found is of even higher quality than the silver, showing evidence of complicated refinements like granulation and fire gilding. Such methods would be considered too expensive to replicate today. The Romans often viewed civilizations and cultures that lived beyond their borders as barbaric, but finds like this prove that wasn't necessarily the case. The nature of human burials has changed a lot over the past few thousand years. We've seen mummification, pit burials, ship burials, disposal at sea, and everything in between. Today, the most common option people choose for their disposal is cremation, which is an older tradition than you might imagine. In August 2020, archaeologists in Israel found the remains of a cremation that took place around 9,000 years ago. Their discovery took place in Baisamun, where they found a cremation pyre pit and the semi-cremated remains of a young adult inside it. The pit has been preserved because it was buried after the cremation ritual. 355 bone fragments remain inside the pit, all of which were burnt at temperatures of up to 700 degrees Celsius. Based on the position of the remains, it seems the deceased person was placed into the pyre in a sitting position and then surrounded by flowering plants. That might have been for decorative purposes or, less pleasantly, to mask the smell of burning flesh. 5 other sets of cremated remains were later found in the same area. This marks a change of tradition in the ancient culture of the region, which practiced ancestor worship up until this point. Lake Titicaca is considered beautiful by everybody who ever sets eyes on it, but to the ancient Inca, it was sacred. From a practical point of view, it provided them with natural resources, but it also played a crucial role in their mythology. They believed that the godlike couple Manco Capac and Mama Oclo emerged from the island of the sun in the middle of the lake and founded the Inca capital city of Cuzco on the edge of the lake as a dedication to that belief. Some scholars even believe that they viewed the whole lake as a deity. 16th century Spanish writers noted that the Inca sailed onto the lake on rafts to drop offerings into the water, and in August 2020, we found one such offering. It's a stone box that was dropped into the lake around 500 years ago and became embedded in sediment. When it was opened by archaeologists, it was found to contain a small figurine of either llama or alpaca made of shell and a tiny gold foil that might be a replica of the kind of bracelets that were worn by Inca nobles of the time. It's likely that whoever left this deposit was hoping for a successful llama breeding season. We hope they got their wish. Sometimes nature gives, and sometimes nature takes away. If you're very lucky, nature might eventually give back again. That's what happened to this temple in the Odisha region of India. It was built during the 15th century in tribute to Lord Gopinath, one of Vishnu's many avatars. Everything was fine with the temple for 400 years, but then the Mahanadi River suddenly changed its course in the 19th century and flooded the area, submerging not only the temple, but also an entire nearby village. The temple's statues were saved and taken to the Gopinath Dev temple in nearby Padmavati, but the building itself was doomed. Then, in June 2020, the water subsided and the temple reappeared. It might look badly damaged in these pictures, in which it's clearly still mostly underwater, but local authorities have expressed hope that the remaining water can be artificially drained away and the temple can be restored. Even if restoration isn't possible, the Indian National Trust for Art hopes to have the temple taken apart, moved elsewhere, and reassembled. That sounds like it might be a little too much to hope for given the temple's current state, but who knows what might be possible. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and enjoy watching new videos on my channel. Thanks for watching and see you soon!